Good evening, everyone. We are back in Deuteronomy Chapter 4. We left off in verse 14 last week. And in chapter 4 is because it begins a very deep, or the instructional discourse that God has given to Moses, and Moses is now reiterating or remembering and recounting all of these to the new generation of the Israelites, the ones who left Egypt under 20, and those who were born in the wilderness. And hence, in this recap of all the incidences, Moses is now showing these Israelites what God means by all the things that has happened beforehand. Chapter 4, verse 15, it says, "Take careful heed to yourselves." Now, this word, take careful heed, the idea of heed, aware, right? Be aware, or be guarded. Be guarded. And the idea of be careful or take careful heed here would be use your strength. And so this is not something that is casual, and it tells us something that is intentional, and it has to be done very carefully. And so verse 15 is to use their own strength, their own might, if you want to call it that way. Love the Lord your God with all your might. And that's the concept, all their strength to guard themselves from idolatry. And so this next part is about idolatry. And the way God defines idolatry is very visual. As you can remember, I have mentioned to you oftentimes, the Hebrew language focuses on the intentional actions, the verbs, as well as things that you can touch, feel, see, smell, that kind of thing. And then it says, you saw. You actually did not see any form, and the idea of form here will be, well, I guess shape would be a good explanation. There is no shape in the sense that when they saw God at Horeb, and remember Horeb is Sinai, and this will refer to Exodus 19. All right, Exodus 19 continues to be the important reference point starting from chapter 1. This chapter 19, there was fire, there was thick clouds, there was smoke, there was lightning. No, it's in the midst of the fire, and by that you can safely assume that it's lightning. And then lest you act corruptly. The idea of act corruptly, and the word corruptly is to pervert, right? To pervert. What do you mean to pervert? To spoil? To spoil the concept of God. And God is saying, you saw no form, and if you pervert and make for yourselves a carved image. Now, the idea of a carved image is actually, how would you say, something that you carve out that resembles a statue, right? A figurine. That's a carved image of any form. Now, the idea of form here essentially gives you a structure or a design, right, of any figure. And this would be, well, I guess you could say that all of these refer to the same concept. The carved image a form of a figure essentially is to 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 cut out either in wood or to chisel out in form of stone in the likeness of either a male or a female. The likeness of any animal, and that would be the same. The likeness here would be the figure. And in this case, I think you can use the word design or model. So you don't model after any animal on earth, or the model of any birds that flies in the air, or the model of anything that creeps on the ground or walk slowly on the ground, the likeness of anything that is in the water under the land. And then you also make sure that when you lift your eyes to the skies, right? This is the skies. Notice everything is very visual. And then when you see the sun, the moon, the stars, and all the stars in heaven, when you feel driven to worship, and the word, I remember I kept telling you, the word worship is to bow. Bow in a way where you bow all the way. And the English uses the word worship. And then serve them. Serve them means to do things for them. Now, this concept of worship or bow down and serve them is actually very pagan. Now, in the pagan world, you find that idols are figurines. They're carved out of creatures, male or female, and it's in various forms, basically. But you find that they bow down because they don't know who they are. They believe that they are of power, of greatness, of supernatural explanation, because they don't understand. Now, the idea of serve means you need somebody to tell them what to do. And in pagan institution of faith, in the Canaanites, in the places surrounding the Israelites, in such circles, you find that there's always a priest. And the priest seems to be the spokesperson for these kinds of deaf and dumb idols. And so the priest becomes all powerful, as opposed to God being the true and living God, and he appoints his priest, and the priest represents the people and act on behalf of the people. Trust. And God speaks through Moses and leaves word of instructions how to behave, so that the priests do not speak on behalf of God. The priests only act on behalf of the people to serve God. You see the difference there? That is a very, very big difference. So God says idolatry is to treat something that God made as equivalent to himself, which is God is through a priest. And the priest becomes almighty in that sense, because nobody knows what God says. Now, in this case, they have seen the fire of God, the smoke of God, the sound of God, but no shape or form of God. And so God says, if you make any of these forms, you would have corrupted God. And so that is the way that is being described here. And that the Lord your God has given to all the peoples under all of heaven as a heritage. You notice that everything that God has described that to warn the Israelites, don't make these into gods, is because God has made all these things to be given to people for their use. And to turn all these things into to an El or a God is to pervert who the Lord has taken you and brought you out an iron cauldron or pot. I don't think furnace is will make the cut. And it's important for us now to realize that Egypt is described as an iron pot. Why an iron pot? Because an iron pot is long lasting, can do a lot of things. Of course, the imagery of an iron pot is that it could boil you, can cook you, can do things, and it doesn't break. And that the people in there has to listen to the pressure of the pot. And that's the picture of Egypt. And now God has taken them out of this pot called Egypt to become God's people, an inheritance. And this becomes a possession of God that they are today. So they are told from Sinai, they have been made into a people of God. And now that generation has gone, and Moses is now recounting back and is telling them, yes, that's what you are today. You are the people of God. His share of the inheritance or the possession of God. God is now saying, out of all the peoples in the world, I've taken you out of Egypt, and you are now my people. Right? That's the important concept up to verse 20. Now from verse 21, you notice Moses keeps recounting this. This is what I kept raising this, and God eventually told me to shut up. Don't bring it up. And it is important for us to realize that God was angry with me. Now, that is an admission. And then he says, for your sakes. Now, this one I need to explain to you. For your davar or davarim or devarim, right? For your devarim. And you know the word devarim is from the word davar. And so basically it says for your words. And the word words, remember I had started in Deuteronomy Chapter 1 verse 1, the word that literally doesn't mean words literally, but it means the issues, the matter, the things that has happened. And so it says your words means that the things that you have caused, you have raised, and you know God was angry with Moses because Moses got angry when God says speak to the rock, and Moses struck the rock twice and was screaming at the people. And that is what it means, not your sakes, blaming them, but because of the incidences that revolved around them. And God swore that I, Moses, would not cross over the Jordan. Now remember, Moses stayed on the eastern shore of the Jordan, and we have witnessed in the previous chapter that the beginnings of the inheritance took place in the land of the Amorites and the land of Bashan, right? Taking over King Sihon and King Og. And Moses had that privilege to see God paving the way, but God says, once we talk about the other side of Jordan, that's a no-no, right? that I would not enter the good land which the Lord your God is giving you as a possession, but I must die, and by die means end the tenure of his life in this land. What land? In Jordan, what we call Jordan now, in the east of Jordan. And then I must not cross over the Jordan. But you, this generation, this you would be this generation. This generation shall cross over. And in verse 22, you find the word possess is to trample down, to seize that good land. You notice the land that God promised is the good land, the land that is Tov. And I had mentioned to you, those of you who are following the Bible lands walkthrough, the best of all these lands, they came out of Egypt. They wandered in the northern part of the Arabian Peninsula. They traveled the length of the present-day Jordan, up Edom, and then Moab, and then Ammon, and then conquered the Amorite. Area doesn't compare to the land that is going to cross over the Jordan River, and that is called the land that is Tov, the good land. So 23, take heed. Now the word take heed is guard. Right? Guard yourselves. Take good care and watch get the covenant of the Lord your God, which he made with you. Where, right? If you recall in Exodus chapter 24, you would find that Moses slaughtered the bulls, kept half the blood, sprinkled it on the ground, and the other half on the people, and says all that God has said we will do, and that was the covenant, the Berit. And so do not forget. Remember the meaning of forget. Do not ignore. Right? Do not be oblivious. All right? Do not misplace. Do not misplace the covenant which God made. And then it says, and then you forget this covenant, and then you make for yourself all these carved image in the form of anything which the Lord your God has forbidden you. Now, this is one of those words which we need to see. In verse 23, the word command. And this means command not to do. And so this is by context. The word actually means command. Why do you call it a command? Very simple. This is in Exodus chapter 20, right? We call it the 10 words, the 10 Devarim, the 10 statements, the 10 issues that God has laid down. And the first of them is, do not make anything that resembles God. And says that the Lord your God is a consuming fire, a jealous God. And when we were in the book of Exodus, I have described to you consuming fire. And you always notice this word consuming fire. What does that mean? It means a fire that eats. And what it means is that visually, when the fire comes down from heaven, like in the case of Elijah, calling God to take and accept the sacrifice that was soaked in water. and fire came from heaven and licked it all up. And we use these English words. It ate, it licked. Well, the idea of a consuming fire is that when the fire comes, well, what the fire touches is no longer its original form. And in that sense, the visual observation is that, oh, the fire ate it up. And that is what it means by a consuming fire. So God is a consuming fire, but God is also a jealous God. Now, what do you mean by jealous? And it's not an envy kind of idea. The word jealous here is kana. It's like a mother bird protecting the baby birds, the hatchlings in the nest. That's what it means by jealous. God guards his people. God puts statutes, commands, judgments to surround his people. God puts his Torah to guard his people because God is a jealous God. God keeps reminding his people what to do. And this in itself is a demonstration of a jealous God. God provides the recount. God provides a reminder. God provides the awareness. God provides the warnings and so on and so forth. And that is a display of a jealous God. You see, God is not a jealous God in the sense of a jealous wife or a jealous husband of modern day thinking. God is a jealous God because this people, called his people that he took out from the iron pot of Egypt, is warned and guarded and protected by his Torah, his instructions. What to do, what not to do, and what are the consequences and what are the boundaries. And that is why he is a jealous God. Now, if God is not a jealous God, he wouldn't care. But because he cares, there is an intimate relationship. So God is a relational God. Verse 25. Verse 25 begins the reminder of the next generation. See, interestingly, when they came out of the iron pot of Egypt, the generation that's before Moses would be the under 20s, and also now those who were born in the wilderness. And during those days in Exodus chapter 12, there were lots of reminder that whatever they did at the Passover on the 14th of Nisan, what they are to tell their children and their children's children. So grandchildren is children's children. So when you have your next generations and you have grown old in the land, and then when you 25 says you act corruptly, remember? Act corruptly basically means to pervert, right? To spoil the image of God, to spoil the picture of God. And how do you do that? You notice, remember, in Hebrew, everything is visual and action-oriented. You make a graven image in the form of anything up in the skies, flying in the skies, walking on earth, creeping on earth, swimming in the water beneath the earth, and you do evil. Now remember, the word evil is ra in the eyes of the Lord. Evil is what is disagreeable, right? Disagreeable. What God doesn't want you to do, what God disagrees and you do, that is called evil. And God looks at it and says, that's evil. And when you do that, then you find that you will provoke him to anger. The idea here is to cause God to be angry. That is what it means, right? To cause God to be angry. Can anyone cause God to be angry? Yes. And God is laying it out in clear terms, in unambiguous terms. That's why Hebrew is an unambiguous language, because it's based on actions that you can see, touch, and feel. Things that you can see, touch, and feel. And so when you make all these graven images of any form, you are spoiling the image of God, because God has no form. Because they didn't see anything of God at Mount Sinai. And so you can't make a picture or a graven image of a cloud. You can't make a graven image of a lightning. You can't make a graven image of a sound. And that's how man tries to represent El or Elohim. Verse 26. This is the way that Moses, or the Oriental, the Hebrew way, is putting them on the spot, I would say, right? Putting them on the spot to make them very clear that God is absolutely serious about this. And so it says, I call heaven and earth to witness against you this day, that you will soon utterly perish from the land which you cross over to possess. If you do this, if you provoke God to anger. And so you have heaven, earth as a witness. When 2 or 3 witnesses. And so heaven is Shamayim, and Aretz. And these are 2. And you always find that Genesis 1:1, when God created the heaven and the earth. And that's how the pair always works, because these are things that people can see. And when you look at it as a point of swearing, that you're testifying, well, the land and the skies is looking at you this day. And that's how it's said. They are now witnesses of all these things. And basically, to witness is to testify, to warn. And they said that's God has made them in place. Now you'll be surprised that heaven and earth is always used as a witness. And we may think that, oh, is heaven and earth an inanimate object? And the answer is no. In the Hebrew view, heaven and earth is not considered an inanimate object. Inanimate in our sense, in our modern day sense, that it is of no particular use. It's dead. It's not. Heaven and earth, or Shamayim and Aretz, are both active concepts. And so in Genesis chapter 1, let the earth bring forth, let the seas bring forth, let the sky bring forth. And all of these are discussed and narrated as something that is active, that is alive, that exists, right? Now, we may not understand all of these, but I'm just saying that this is how the Hebrew expresses. And so Moses calls on Shamayim and Aretz to be the warning against you, that you will definitely perish, die, destroyed from this land which you cross over to possess, and you will not extend your days, but be utterly destroyed. Now, utterly destroyed comes in 2 forms. One is you'll be lost, you will die, you will perish, your kingdom will no longer be. And all of these are true, because eventually we find, and we have covered the prophet books, the warnings came one after another that God is going to send the Assyrians and then the Babylonians, and finally, bang, everything was gone. Yes, that is what utterly destroyed actually means. And so we are now many years before that, and God is now giving them the warning, the witness that this is serious. This is not what our colloquial says, mine. God is an absolutely serious God. Now, we learn a lot of things about God in this chapter. And the Lord will scatter you among the peoples, and you will be left few in number among the nations where the Lord will drive you. And so in Assyria, the Roman Empire, in the Grecian Empire, all of these will be where they will be scattered. And there you will serve Elohim. Verse 28. And you notice, this is Elohim. You mean there are other Elohims? Yes. Well, there is the Elohim of Genesis 1 verse 1 that is the creator of the world. But Elohim doesn't really mean God. Elohim means the mighty one or the mighty ones. And so heroes are Elohim. Idols are also Elohim. And there you will serve Elohim. It's even in the times of the Grecian Empire or the Roman Empire, the emperors became Elohim, right? And so the work of men's hands, wood and stone, which neither see nor hear nor eat nor smell. This is the Hebrew way of expressing that these wood and stone is not living, not alive, as compared to Jehovah, the God that is speaking through Moses now. That is how is being expressed. But from there, if you are then scattered and you're outside your land, this is important. You notice God is a patient God. God is a faithful God, and God is a God who seeks repentance. And so it says from there, and the idea of seek means to search with a purpose to find. There is no such thing called search. So if you know the little kids game, hide and seek, right? Or basically you're actually going to look for those who have hidden themselves, right? And the objective is to find the Lord your God, Jehovah, your Elohim, and you will definitely find, right? You will definitely find. And this word find means to find out. It also means that you will secure this knowledge. So you look for it to find, with a purpose to find, and then you will definitely find it. That's basically what he means, right? Find it. And find what? You will definitely find in verse 29, you will definitely find if you seek, and in this word is another word. It is to seek with care. And so what have you got here? If you notice, you have one word here, second word here, and third word here. And all three means virtually the same thing. That you will go and look for God with the purpose of finding God, and you will find God, and if you look for him carefully. How do you do that carefully? With all your heart, all your soul. These are all very Hebrew terms. You see, God doesn't want his children to look for him half-heartedly. God wants his children to look for him with the full heart. And that's repentance. To come back to God. Basically that. And when he says heart, that would mean their will, their mind. Their soul here would mean their person, their nefesh, that they want to give themselves back to God. And we'll see this in chapter 6. It says, when you are in distress, distress means you are in the narrow, you are in a tight spot. I think the equivalent English would be in a tight spot, in a tight space where you're squeezed together. All these things come upon you in the latter days. The latter days means the end days. And I guess in our terms, the end times. And it says, when you turn to the Lord and obey his voice. The idea of turn to the Lord is shuv, is to return to original state of the relationship. That they want to do that. And to obey means to hear, right? To hear. So to turn, to hear, for the Lord your God is a merciful God. The idea here of merciful is compassionate. Compassionate, it comes from the word womb. Right? No, the mother's womb. The idea here is the mother gives everything to the baby in the womb. The baby doesn't ask for it. The baby doesn't know how to ask for it, but the baby needs it. And the mother gives. And that's the idea of merciful or compassionate. And so God is a compassionate God, right? Compassionate God. If you turn and obey, you see, there is a condition, definitely. Of course, although they use the word womb, the people of God is not a baby. The people of God has to use their mind, their will, their person to give themselves back, to search for God, to return to God, to hear his voice. And then God says, yes, I will not forsake you, nor destroy you, nor forget the covenant which he swore to the fathers. God is a faithful God when he says that he will not forsake. What does it mean, not forsake? Abandon. God is about to abandon if they continue doing that, but right now, if they do that to turn and obey, God will not abandon. The word destroy here is to put to ruin. And this would be bad. Because God can actually put to ruin everything. God will not forget. The word forget is to ignore, right? To ignore. God will not ignore. Every time you read words like these, will not destroy, will not forget, means if it is conditional. God is a faithful God. God is a merciful God. And he is a conditional God. His mercy and his faithfulness is conditioned upon them to turn and to obey, and of course to seek, right? Up there, to seek. If people do not seek God, nor turn to God, nor obey his voice, all of these, God will abandon them, God will put them to ruin, and God will ignore all the covenant. Can God ignore the covenant? Yes, because he has been the one keeping it, and if they do not keep their part of it, then what's the point of having a covenant? That's how God is. Can God ignore? He's not breaking the covenant. Notice that. He is just ignoring because these people ignore him. Verse 32. And in verse 32 onwards, now ask. The word ask is to beg, right? It is to consult concerning the days that are past, which were before you. Now, the idea of before, you notice this. Before means in the face. Means you are actually looking at it. Now, if you recall, the Hebrew concept of past and in the face is the past. It has gone away. What is future is at the back that you can't see. Since the day that God created man on the earth, and from one end of heaven to the other, whether any great thing like this has happened or like it has been heard. What is this? That's a good question. What is this? This is davar. It is very interesting that the Bible uses davar in a very broad perspective. This davar, has it been heard? What about the davar? The davar says, has any people ever heard the voice of God speaking in the midst of the lightning, like you have heard and you are still alive? Or did God ever try to go and take for himself a nation in the midst of another nation? That would be Egypt, by trials, by signs, by wonders, by war, by a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. That's a friendly arm. And by great terrors, according to all that the Lord your God did for you in Egypt, notice, before your eyes, that they can see, right? They can actually see. Did all these things ever happen? Now, I want to pause here to just reiterate one point. You notice that when the incident happened in Exodus chapter 19 and 20 and 21, it always recalled back to Exodus chapter 12, 13, and 14. And so whatever happened in the early chapters of Exodus is never happening again. God did it and did it once and told them, remember that. And if you can't remember that, then you are not worthy of being my people. That is why God keeps repeating. It's that particular incident that never ever had happened before and never will happen again. To you, it was shown. And the idea of shown, we must always remember, it is to cause to see. They can actually see everything that God did, that you might know, because you can see and experience it now. You can know. It becomes your knowledge that Jehovah himself is Elohim, right? Jehovah himself is Elohim. Not any of these things that you saw in Egypt, and not any of these graven images. There is none. There is none other but him alone. would be a better translation. Besides him means him alone. There is none other. Nothing will exist. Nothing will continue but him alone. And so Jehovah is the Elohim that they must know, and they cannot spoil that image. And so out of Shamayim, he let you hear his voice. And that was at the top of Mount Sinai that you can hear the voice. Remember, it comes back to Exodus 19, that he might instruct you. Verse 36, the idea of instruct here is to discipline you, right? It means to correct you. That's the word instruct. It's not just merely giving instruction, it is to shape them or put them back in proper position. On the land, he showed you his great fire, and you heard his words, right? This is Devarim, the things that he had said. You heard. And so you saw and you heard out of the midst of the lightning. And because he loved your fathers. You see, God loved the fathers. And the word love here is ahav. And one day we will speak about this. Ahav means God has compassion. God feels for his fathers, right? Which was there when they first came out. That would be the Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And therefore he chose their descendants, which is this group of people, and then brought you out of Egypt with his presence. This is important. What is his presence? The word presence here is go out in his face. That they could see God's face, not in a literal sense, but they could see the presence, as if God was there with his mighty power, driving out from before you nations greater and mightier than you, to bring you in, to give you their land as an inheritance like today. And so when God loved your fathers, God gave everything to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Everything. And this is the everything now, the land. And to show the power of God, that King Sihon greater than you, King Og greater than you, you've already taken their land as inheritance. Therefore know this day and consider in your heart. Verse 39. You'll be surprised that this word consider is cause to return, to shuv. In your heart. Bring it back to your heart. In your mind. Let it be sitting there. That the Lord himself, Jehovah himself, is God. You notice these words? Jehovah himself is God. In heaven above and on earth beneath, there is no other. You notice it keeps repeating itself. Shamaim and Aretz, the witnesses, they also testify there is no other. So as a conclusion, verse 40, therefore, and keep his statutes, his commandments, which I command you today, that it may go well. Right? Go well is tov. With you and your children. This is a promise, right? Your children and your children's children, that you will last long, you have a long life, that it will continue to be long. You will have, all the days. that the Lord is, your God is giving you for all the time, the long day, right? The long day, this word here, the long days, for all days. The whole idea here is you continue to live and be happy there. Our last segment, and let's quickly wrap this up, verse 41. Verse 41 is a brand new, totally different, distinct idea, and this would be the cities of refuge. He says, set apart 3 cities on this side of the Jordan. Which side? The east side, where Moses is. They have conquered this side of the promised land toward the rising of the sun. What do you mean? The rising of the sun? That would be the east, right? That's a direction. That the manslayer, okay? What do you mean, the manslayer? The manslayer would be somebody who accidentally kills someone. If you accidentally kill someone, you can run there, and there it describes, kills his neighbor unintentionally, right? Unintentionally, without having hated him in the times past. It is not premeditated. So thou shalt not kill. It means you are killing intentionally. So this is not premeditated. It's accidental. It is not because of any hatred. And that by fleeing to one of these cities, he will continue to live and he won't be judged by the law. That's what it means. And the places would be Bezer in the Reubenites. This would be Ramoth in Gilead of the Gadites, Golan in Bashan for the Masonites. Now, understand this. The plateau of the Reubenites, the Gilead of the Gadites, you remember, whoever was the Reubenites and Gadites were given each one the high part and one was the low parts of Gilead. And Bashan was given to the half tribe of Manasseh. And so in each of those places is a city of refuge. And that would be the principle that these, although they may have killed somebody, but because they did not intentionally kill, will have a chance of a refuge, that they will not be punished. And that would be how you can see God is merciful and God is just in the cities of refuge. Now, with this, we end chapter 4 of Deuteronomy.